Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar. We're so glad to have you here for this session where we're going to discuss and explore new ways of measuring the impact of learning in your programs. And we know that this is a topic that resonates with many of you. When we invest in learning, of course, we want to be able to prove if the initiatives have been successful or not. And in your pre-reflections, we also seen how tricky this can be, from capturing data on knowledge retention to measuring the right things at the right time, and also connecting learning programs to organizational change. And this also reflects the discussions that we had with our community for L&D leaders recently. So today we are going to look at new practical ways to measure learning impact that go beyond the more traditional ways, such as self-assessment. And we're going to explore new ways of learning AI, reflection, and dialogue to tell the story of the impact of your learning programs. And you will also get the opportunity to exchange ideas with each others. We have so many experienced participants here today, so we want to hear from all of you. And now let's get this webinar started.
Yeah, let's do that. Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to have so many of you online to discuss this super interesting topic today. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping rules, as we might call them, or not rules, but tips for you so you know what to expect. As you see, if you scroll down here below the stream, you'll see a general chat and another for any type of technical issues that you might encounter. And well, the general chat is supposed to be what you're probably used to from video calls in general. So any general shout outs, questions, etc. We have quite a few colleagues online who'll be happy to answer any curious questions that you might have along the way, if Emilia and I can't jump in at that point exactly. Also, during this session, we'll have some specific questions and other activations related to the topics that we are talking about, and those will appear below the stream as the session unfolds. So you can just sit back and relax and enjoy the show, and please do join in. Everything that you see today will be available for you afterwards as well, together with the recording. So yeah, you'll have access to everything afterwards. Shall we, Emilia?
Yes, and we also wanted to extend a very warm thank you for getting ready for this session to make most of our time here together. So thank you for doing the pre-reflection before the session. And before we head into the webinar, we wanted to take a moment to review the insights that you have shared there. And it was also really nice to read all your introductions. I've been scanning through most of them. I think we actually got some right now when the webinar started, so maybe not all of them. But thank you for taking the time to introduce yourselves. And we also got a lot of feedback on what stories you wish to tell about the impact of your learning programs. And so if we have a look at the AI summary here, I'll just scan through this quickly together with you all. So in the discussion, you discuss how the challenges of measuring impact of learning programs, emphasizing the need for effective metrics to assess knowledge retention, application and organizational change. And you also express interest in exploring innovative evaluation methods and the importance of demonstrating tangible results to stakeholders. And that's actually also what we have on the table for you today. And we're also going to show some new innovative evaluation approaches that you can do in Housebase. So we're very excited to get into that. And we also had a look at the discussion about the challenges and the stories you would like to tell. And we used the Housebase AI to synthesize these and identify the top 5 challenges that you mentioned. So if you look in the page of the video stream, if you look just below the video, you're going to see that there's a list of all the challenges listed here. So while we read through the challenges to introduce you to them and summarize them for you. We would like your help to prioritize these challenges to help us identify the ones that are most important to you right now. And keep this in mind as well throughout the rest of the webinar, because at the end we're going to get back to this and share some ideas and insights that we learned throughout the session. So Hannah, could you take us through the challenges?
I'll do that. So yeah, starting from the top. It's often hard to determine business goals for learning programs, is what we have heard from you, meaning that maybe we don't have deep enough discussions, for example, with business and stakeholders to determine the goals before we get started. So obviously, if you don't know it upfront, your goals, if you don't know them upfront, it's difficult to track them and follow up afterwards. Self-reported data can be unreliable, meaning that when we ask people to assess their knowledge, for example, and they do that for themselves, it might be biased, it might not be done correctly, people might assess their knowledge differently. There are often long and quite complicated, ambiguous feedback loops in business. It takes a long time to see business results from learning initiatives. And it's hard to attribute something to these, hard to attribute success to these learning initiatives specifically, especially if there's a long time before you can see the results. People also often measure only engagement. That's what we are, at least that's easy to follow up with, because you can see, for example, how many took the course, how many completed it, and so on. But that does not necessarily mean the same thing. That it doesn't mean that learning has actually happened or that people have applied their learnings. It doesn't mean that there has actually been any behavior change, let alone any business results. So engagement is not the same thing as impact. And on top of that, we often lack the tools. So if the impact that we're seeing is behavior change, for example, and people are starting to apply things and talk about things in their work environment, that might happen offline, and we don't have any tools to drill into it to really understand what is going on there. So it's difficult to measure. I know that, or I hope that you have been prioritizing these different difficulties and challenges while I was talking through them. So let's see what it looks like now. I think we'll have more answers coming through as we start looking at them, but do we have a top 2 already?
Yes, so it seems like, let's see if the audio works better now. Sorry about that. So it seems like difficulty to assess applicational knowledge is one of the top challenges, but it's also very close to engagement of reaction do not equal impact, and also business goals for learning programs are hard to determine. So it seems like these 3 challenges are the ones that we're going to focus on, listening to ideas and insights that can help us overcome them throughout the session. So thank you very much for taking a moment to help us prioritize and let us know what matters most to you.
We'll actually get back to this later, so keep this in mind throughout the session.
Yes. And now it's time to move on to the next exercise, or the next part of this session. So I'm going to switch steps to the next one. So unfortunately, we'll break the prioritization now, but thank you for your answers so far. And now we're going to move over to some theory to set the kind of stage for the rest of the webinar and the discussion. So for the purpose of this webinar, we are to be able to discuss different aspects of how we evaluate learning impact. We're going to use one of the most commonly used methods called the Kirkpatrick model as a reference. And there are, of course, many other models that you can use for this. But this one is quite well known, and for this purpose, we choose to use this one. And this model has 4 levels, as you can see, and it can be displayed in different ways as well. So you might have seen it with the results or with the reactions in the top of the pyramid, so that it looks more like a funnel where you move through the lower levels towards the higher ones in a funnel kind of like way. But you can also see the model with the results at the top. And either way, independent of what way you look at this model, it's always important to start with the results in mind first when you design a new learning program, and start from the results and design the learning program backwards. So the reason we want to do this is so that we align the activities to the results so that we can achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. But it's also good if we know how we're going to measure the results of the program before we design it, so that we can both measure what the situation looks like in the beginning, so that we can compare it to the state afterwards when we go back to measure the impact. And we're going to move through this model from the first level towards the top. So let's start with reactions. Most of you probably know about, or aware, or are familiar with this model in some way, but just to set the context and make sure that we're all on the same level, let's do a quick walkthrough. So in level 1, which is about reaction, this is about measuring if the learners have found the training to be relevant to the role. And at this level, we can measure things such as attendance, engagement, but also feedback. And these quick wins are things that are quite easy to measure. And most traditional learning tools can also do this, but they don't really tell us if learning or change has taken place yet. So in the next level, where we look at learning, here we are going to look at if the learner has acquired the knowledge, skills, attitudes, confidence, or commitment that the program was intended to achieve. And through, for example, through social learning in Housebase, we can easily measure this by observing and clearly see how knowledge is transferred between colleagues. And you will get to see more of this later, of course. And in the next level, which is behavior, this is about proving real-world impact. And we do this by tracking behavioral changes and to see if the learners are applying what they learned in their job. And this can be measured through before and after service, for example, but also through observation, feedback, and reflection, which are all things that Housebase as well can support. And finally, in the last level, we're looking at the results. So this is about the actual business results that we're hoping to achieve as an outcome of the learning. And this is the ultimate level and is often also the hardest one to measure, especially if you didn't define clear, measurable goals before you launched the program. But it's also challenging because the results often happen outside of the learning program, which requires also more collaboration and planning to be able to measure. And it's also about assessing whether the learning initiative led to meaningful change, such as, for example, improved performance, increased sales, or stronger team dynamics. And Hanna is going to share some more examples of ways that you can measure the results later on as well. And what also makes these challenges is that sometimes it can take months after the learning initiative before these things start to show up as well. So we're really talking about lagging indicators that should be tied to the goals that we set in the beginning. And as you've seen as well, as I mentioned in the previous steps, with the support of Housebase, you can, of course, track leading metrics before, during, and after the program to spot early signs if change is taking place. So to wrap this up, when we talk about results, we're really talking about the bigger picture. If the learning effort actually created the change we were hoping to achieve. And as you know, impact doesn't always show up in the numbers, and it's not always what we're looking to achieve. And traditional ways of calculating ROI doesn't always capture the full value that we get out of the learning. So with that, now Hanna is going to walk us through some ideas on how we can rethink the ROI in L&D and look beyond just financial returns and into the broader impact that learning can have across the organization.
Right. Thank you, Emilia. I think it's so useful to understand these different levels of results, if you will, in the Kirkpatrick model, for example, in order to understand the impact and the ROI as well. That can be one kind of an impact. You'll see my slides soon here on the stream as well. But like Emilia said, we tried to break down ROI to the financial impact that you might expect to have from learning initiatives versus other kinds of results. Sorry. There we go. Sorry. Okay, we should be good. So we tried to rethink ROI here a little bit. So this might be a question that you ask yourself, or the leadership might ask, what's the ROI of this learning initiative? Let's imagine for a minute that we get this question. We might often intuitively think of earning or saving money. So we're talking about maybe increased sales or decreased incidents or accidents. We're talking about less turnover in the workforce. So things that we can pretty soon measure in euros or dollars or whatever currency you are measuring in. And this might work particularly well for sort of clear, straightforward topics, such as, for example, compliance type of trainings where maybe you have a security training on a factory floor. You would assume that you'd, after the training, have less accidents, so you'd have also less costs related to accidents. So that would show up on your sort of in your monetary result. And there's sort of a clearer connection between the reaction, so whether people attended, whether people completed the course, maybe between learning, if there was some sort of a test. There's a clear connection from that level all the way up to the result. But as we know, and as Emilia also pointed out already, ROI is not necessarily always about money, because not all impact is financial. Some learning programs, especially if we talk about, let's say, leadership learning programs and development programs, they are more about behavior or culture or mindset. And it's not necessarily then relevant or possible to measure that in money right away, but it's just as critical. And it even is super critical for our business results further down the line. So at some point, we hope to see the results in our quarterly business reports, for example, but that might not happen right away. It's also more difficult to trace these results back to the learning initiative in the first place, especially if you didn't create the metrics and your goals up front. And it's also more difficult to see what's actually happening on the levels of behavior and learning if you didn't create any activities or ways to follow that up. And we'll see some examples of that, how you can do that in a minute. So let's look at some examples of what ROI could be. We already talked about the monetary ROI, so the increased sales if you have a sales training, there is reduced incidents if you have a cybersecurity or physical type of a security training, or even from leadership training, if that results in lower employee turnover because employees are happier at the workplace, that might show up pretty soon. But then we have the other type of initiatives and learning where the results are more non-monetary or intangible. Could be things like improved team dynamics or readiness for change, or a stronger alignment with company values. Or in the example of enhanced problem solving, let's say that you train your leaders in bringing in more psychological safety in the teams, or maybe they learn about systemic thinking in their projects. So quite abstract and intangible things, but they are supposed to have a result at some point. And this resulted in enhanced problem solving. We'll have bolder innovations, and that might end up being actual business results down the line. So how do we then measure what happens in the workforce and between the employees while they are acquiring these, or while we are moving closer to these non-monetary ROI? Of course, we'll have surveys, self-assessments, feedback, things like that, even tests to assess actual knowledge gained. We are all familiar with that, but they might not be as useful as we would wish, especially if people are doing them in sort of a vacuum or a void if they don't hear from each other. So here at Housespace, we really advocate for a dialogic approach, even when we talk about surveys and self-assessments, because when you can see yourself in relation to others, it creates a whole huge difference. It takes the focus away from me and brings it to us. So we do a lot of collective reflections. It might be surveys, it might be discussions around topics, it might be feedback, different types of activations. But when we see each other there, it's more likely that we also share the commitment and we share the accountability to what we agree and to what we learn. And when the learning is social in that way, it's also more likely to stick. So we believe that collaborative measurement makes impact visible. Soon in Lotta's example, we'll see some ways to do this. So how do we actually drill down into especially qualitative types of assessments, such as discussions or large scale conversations, even between tens or hundreds or thousands of people. Housespace is in general really well equipped for these types of everything from surveys to really big scale conversations. So yeah, you'll see more in a minute. And also, of course, if you book a demo with us, you'll see even more of it. So to sum this up, when you design your learning program, try to do that with a purpose. So start with thinking of why you are doing this. Why are we delivering this program? What will be different afterwards? What do we expect to see once we have achieved the results that we are going for? So set your goals and your metrics well before initiating the learning program so you can actually track them. And then facilitate meaningful and shared reflections about the impact and commitment. So invite people to discuss and invite people to give feedback together. And then use AI, for example, to help you capture the stories and the patterns from these discussions. So it's a lot about sense making, especially if you are in L&D. You want to facilitate these discussions, but you also want to make sense of them rather than just collect input. And of course, it requires also from stakeholders and from the business in general that they show up and show interest. That also helps amplify the impact, I'd say. I'd like to invite our dear colleague Lotta Mäkinen, who is our visual and participant experience designer. Lotta will show us a real life example from a learning initiative that we went through quite recently. Lotta, what was the big why behind this initiative?
Well, that is a really good question. So we're going to talk about an learning initiative we built this spring around Women's Day. So we're talking about DEI, we're talking about equity and equality. It all started a year ago when we did our first ever one-day campaign around awareness and during Women's Day. And during that day, there was a lot of valuable discussion that was had, a lot of maybe worries or challenges were brought up, and then we wanted to continue working on those this year, not just leave it at that, but we realized there's some change that we need to do as a company. And you mentioned the goals there in your last, how do we measure? So basically when we're talking about an initiative like this, we're a Nordic company and we're a modern company. So the changes that we had to do were quite, I would say, minor, but still we needed to bring different extreme ends of awareness closer together. And that was kind of our main goal, as well as to create a dialogue around, like an open dialogue around this topic. And I am ready to show you how we did that. So yes, here we go. So just a few words about the course itself, how we decided, and then we will move on to the impact part itself. So basically we called it Beyond 50/50, Achieving True Equity Through Awareness. And how we actually ran the course was that we had a period of 4 weeks, out of which 3 weeks were those where we had asynchronous learning happening in 3 different modules. And we opened a module per week, starting February 10th, leading up to the week of the International Women's Day, where we had a facilitated live all-hands session where we reflected on that learning and turned it into change. And I will dig that deeper into that. So just quickly, we introduced the course, and this again is a house-based workspace. I know it looks a bit different than the one that we are in right now. We introduced why we're doing this, how we're going to structure the course, the schedule for the participants, learner expectations, what we expected from them, introduced us as the facilitators, introduced the learning goals, what we're going to do, and then also the key concepts and terms of the course. And just when it comes to the course design and when it comes to a topic like this, we're talking gender equity, we wanted to make sure that none of the content is confrontational or it's not a guilt trip towards anyone. So we put a lot of effort into designing the material carefully and picking what we're going to present during the course. And we also want it to be a smooth learning experience so that everyone can take part and want to take part in addition to their normal work schedule. So we designed each module to take about 20 to 30 minutes each week. And we can dig deeper into the module structure. So basically, we always had a watch and learn part of it, where we had a video of like a very good speaker talking about the phenomena or the topic on a general level and maybe raising kind of like, raising the topics and educating us about the phenomena. Then we had a related task, which was all about reflection. And here, for example, in this topic, we asked people to reflect what stood out to them. And we always built this in a way that you had to comment, give your own insight before you can see other comments. So that's why you really had to reflect it on yourself. What kind of feelings or what happens to me when I listen to this or learn about this topic. But then there's the added plus of actually digging deeper into other ideas, learning from others during that task. And we had a lot of comments happening. We had a lot of threads forming under our colleagues' answers and so on. And let's so many comments. And then the second part was always a scenario task. We wanted to create something that's like a real life scenario that we can really see happening, not in a general way, but also these were tied to the topics that were brought up a year ago. So actual things that we saw had seen happening in our own company. So then we had, again, a reflection task tied to that, asking, why do you think that happens? How do the colleagues could support this, not support it happening, but also just like challenge it and make it not be a reality for us. And also then, have you seen this happen at Housebase, at our company? And in this context, we wanted to make it anonymous, so everyone is encouraged, honestly, to share their experiences about that topic. Then we have short learning interventions called knowledge nuggets that dig deeper into the topic, shared maybe a little bit more about the key concepts and what do they mean. And then the last exercise every week was a takeaway, observe and reflect, which was voluntary, but it was also just to put the seed into the learner's head about, hey, observe the behavior. Do you see this happening? Can you spot it? And then share insights if that happens. And as you can see, this was purely dialogue based. And that is something that I think that also played a huge role in the success of the course, which meant that people were pulled back. So there was an ongoing engagement loop because people participated when they had the time during that week. So then they started commenting people's answers who had commented before, and those people got notifications. Hey, someone liked your reply. Someone invites you back to the discussion. So there was this constant dialogue that was had during that time of 3 weeks. And then, of course, because we wanted it to be easy for sense-making purposes as well, we used a lot of AI to make sense, not just for us as facilitators, but also for other learners during the course. So the week 2 and 3 modules started with a timeout task, which was more just a quick test of like, can we remember what we talked about last week? But then also AI takeaways. So bringing us back to, hey, this was the collective discussion we had. We had a top things that stood out to participants regarding the topic in general and the video, but also then a summary of the scenario task here. And especially for people that maybe didn't recognize some patterns happening in our company, this was a real way for them to see the summary that, okay, maybe I haven't seen it, I haven't subjected to it, but it really happens. So this is a really good way to also make it visible. And then, because now we have been working in our own company context, and the next module was about gender equality in work roles, leadership, as well as pay. So then the next step, the AI summary, was more of a comparison. So we brought in a Euronews article talking about tech industry, talking about gender equity in tech industry. And then based on the discussion we had last week, we did a comparison of how do we align with the tech industry standards, which was very eye-opening and sparked a lot more, again, voluntary discussion about the topic. Yes, and then we had the session on week 4, where we again revisited the contributions of our colleagues in a leaderboard form, and then I will soon show you how we kicked it off and how we took it further. So maybe now I could have my slides here so we can dive deeper into the Kirkpatrick model. As it was introduced.
Lotta, can I just interrupt with a really tiny question from our audience, because others might be interested as well. Did we have our own AI in Housebase, or did we use some other? I know the answer, but I'll let you go.
Yes, we do have our own AI. So basically all of the AI summaries I showed are built in Housebase. Perfect, let's move on. So we talk about the Kirkpatrick model, and we talk about the 4 different levels of it. Looking at reaction level, 94% of our staff took the course. It wasn't compulsory, but they were sucked in, they were interested, and they wanted to take part. On average, participants added 9 comments, and which added up to 433 comments in the workspace, as well as 1,207 contributions, averaging 25 per participant, which means that that's all likes, replies, everything when they engage with others' content. The average time spent per module was 36 minutes. We're happy with it because we think that the added 6 minutes, it's all about pulling back to the engagement afterwards. Module that was most interesting was equality in work roles and exploring gender salary gaps. And days until learning turned into behavioral change was 7, so only a week. And then we had a lot of positive feedback on it. Best social learning experience so far. I must say this was the highlight of the month, and so on. So when we look at the reaction, kind of like what happened there, all of this, the engagement, the feedback indicated that it was a positive reaction to the actual course. Then learning. During the March 6th session, we started with independent reflection time. We wanted people to think about their learning on 3 different levels. So, do I see the world differently after this course? Which part of it was most meaningful to me? And what kind of actions am I planning to take next? And then from these 3 chats, we could again pull in our amazing AI, ask the AI question, can you measure the impact of the course based on these 3 dialogues? And there has, again, suggests that the course had a significant impact on raising awareness and prompting self-reflection. The open sharing of personal experience and perspectives was also noted as impactful. And there is a strong commitment to self-reflection and active participation in promoting gender equality. We're happy with that. Again, all of these things indicate that knowledge was gained and actions were internalized. And then moving on to the behavioral level. Like I mentioned, that it took about a week for it to become visible for us. We managed to create that culture of open dialogue around the topic that was one of our goals. But also then seeing the behavior change was the best kind of a prize for us as the facilitators. We learned that our colleagues started having discussions about the topic with their colleagues, but also at home, bringing in what they had learned into their homes to talk about it with their spouses or with their friends. Concrete change in action in our offices, men stepping up, offering to help with office breakfasts or organizing parties. So again, a big win for us in terms of this course. But also then, because we're a remote first company, so we do have offices, but we have people around the world, which means a lot of our culture and communication happens in Slack, in addition to Housebase, of course. So then we started seeing that transparently happening communication in Slack, people appreciatively challenging themselves. Hey, this is exactly what we have learned about during our course. This is a prime example, like connecting the dots of like kind of calling colleagues out based on the learning. And then results. Like I mentioned, we had that all hands session where we came together, reflect on our learnings. And there we really took it from individual awareness to shared ownership. So basically, we together identified key areas for change in our context. We prioritized them based on importance or urgency, where we want to start with. But also then we co-created a plan, how we're going to take this further. What are the actionable ideas we can take to make these things happen? Who is responsible? And to us, this really signaled that the training didn't only influence the culture of our company, but it really drove tangible outcomes, laying the groundwork for long-term organizational impact. And we are super happy about it. And then one thing I would like to leave you with, one thought. You don't have to answer this question, but imagine this course not being this communal learning experience based on social learning, but what if it was just to watch a video, read an article, take a test, tick a box, bim, bam, boom, done, with the same time invested per participant during each week? How would we even start to measure the return of investment in that? And that is my last gift.
Thank you, Lotta. This was such a beautiful and inspiring experience altogether, being part of this course. So thank you for facilitating it, and thank you for walking us through it as a quick wrap up here today. We have quite a few questions especially about timeframes. Actually, maybe you can answer some of them and then get back to the rest in the workspace afterwards. One is about how did you measure days until learning turned into behavior? Is that based on reflection or answers from learners?
That is both. So basically people quite actively approached us saying like, it's really making an impact. Like, these are the things that I have seen now. Or then of course we saw it transparently on Slack, for example, because we could see it. So we didn't have any kind of like a feedback form at this point to collect that.
Yeah. Then there's another one about, well, since we're talking about changing habits and routines and behaviors, what time frames would you say that, or what time frames do we use for this course between surveys, between follow-ups? Will there be a follow-up for this?
Yes.
What?
So basically, because we have already shared, so this was about a month ago, at least less than a month ago, we have already shared kind of a summary of like, hey, reminder, this is what we agreed upon. But then also in that same context, in the same workspace, there will be bi-monthly feedback loops. So bringing people back in to share, because some of the actions we made, the responsibilities for the leadership and kind of the admin side, but then a lot of it is also kind of a shared responsibility. So we will then bring people back to share what has now been done about these topics and how we have moved forward, but then also for us to reflect, like, have I changed my behavior? Have I seen these changes actually happened, and how? So that will go on at least until the end of the year, until we can make sure that all of these are kind of sustained.
Thank you. I think it illustrates really nicely how we don't just drill into or try to capture impact from the feedback, but already during the initiative itself, during the course itself. And we can use in this case, our built-in AI to understand what's going on in the discussions and what little shifts are happening and what indicators there are that we are moving towards the goals. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring back our audience and start wrapping up by returning to the challenges that we prioritized in the beginning.
Yes, so we are going to get back to take some more questions by the end of the session. But before that, we wanted to give you a moment to reflect a little bit on what we discussed so far. So if we can get the results screen on the screen sharing again. So remember the challenges that we discussed in the beginning of the session. Now we want to invite you to reflect a little bit on those challenges and share any ideas that you had in this session, or maybe things that you learned before that you would like to share as a reflection. So if we could get that into, thank you, perfect. So the three main challenges that we prioritized as the most important ones was the difficulty to assess application of knowledge, engagement or reaction does not equal impact, or business goals for learning programs are hard to determine. So welcome to share your thoughts and ideas from the session, or also things that you would like to share, that maybe things that you have tried that works, that you would like to share with the other participants here. So we'll take a moment to let you share some of your key takeaways so far. So someone appreciates being reminded about the Kirkpatrick again. So that's nice to hear. It's a quite broadly used model, so not surprised to see that one. But also about the opportunities and limitations for measuring effects, ongoing engagement loop, feedback loops. Yes, very important. Involving the staff in work with determining how to measure impact. That's a great insight. And that's also in discussions, especially with the community, we came to the conclusion that even if we know that the goals should be set before we start designing the programs, it's something that can be easy to miss. It can be hard to sometimes get to what the exact goals we're looking for are. So one advice that we received in the community was using the 5 whys. When someone comes with a request for a learning program or initiative, ask them why 5 times to try to get to the bottom, and that will help you identify the measurable goals.
Be brave enough to insist on knowing the goals and the big whys. I think that's a really good takeaway. We've had some questions along the way also about different methods of learning evaluations that we might recommend. Well, you've seen a couple of them. Some might not be as obvious in terms of like, now we are evaluating something. But well, if you're asking us, and you are, since we are hosting this session, we are using a lot of like different evaluation methods in Housebase. Some are surveys or polls that you probably recognize. Others are more qualitative, as you can see here or as you could see in Lotta's example, where we had different discussion threads, for example. Some were anonymous, some were such that we were using our own names. We are being invited and asked to react on other people's comments. So sometimes it's about bringing people back to see what others said, not just handing in their answers themselves. It's a continuous evaluation rather than something that only happens in the end.
Yeah, there was also a comment here about the value of checking in and see what other noticed in the learning program throughout the journey. And that's also what we're doing right now. So interesting reflection about the reflection we're doing right now, in a way.
Yeah. I think someone at some point also asked what tools or media or channels one might use for these different types of questionnaires or surveys. In our case, it's all built into Housebase. But of course, there are millions of tools out there that do sort of the same thing. I guess our take is that when they're all built into the same platform, we can actually use all of them to aggregate insights and insights and outputs from everything that's going on.
Now it sounds like the chat is cooling down a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good sign to move on to the next page. So we still have some time for questions, but before moving on to that, we wanted to invite you here and here we also have, you're going to get access to this afterwards. We have a whole list of actionable ideas that you can use to solve challenges in measuring learning impact that we came up with, all of us here together. So this was generated with our AI Plus functionality. So this is a tool you can use to pull information from several different chats at the same time to generate actionable incomes directly in the session. So this is the type of synthesizing and summarizing that previously, back in the days, it would have taken several hours. Now, thanks to AI, we can do it in the session. And we also built this into Housebase so that you can do this as part of your workshops and the wrap up. So
it's actually not just chats, but you can pull in quantitative data here as well, or even PDF documents.
Exactly. Any information added to this workspace, it even reads your PDFs and include those here. But let's move on to some of the next steps and reflection here. So we wanted to ask you how we can support you in your next steps after this session. So you're welcome to select up to 3 options here. We want to invite you to book a coaching session on measuring the impact of your learning programs to see how we can support you from Housebase with finding new innovative ways for that for your organization. If you're more curious to learn more about Housebase, you can also schedule a Housebase demo with us. If you want to join discussions like this one together with other L&D professionals, you are welcome to applying to join our L&D leaders community. And we also have an upcoming webinar on using AI in L&D. So if you're interested in getting more updates on that, let us know here. We also have another webinar coming up soon where we're going to go even deeper into measuring learning and collaboration together with Roffy Park. So don't miss that. And if there's anything else that you would like us to follow up on, please let us know in the chat. Anything else that I missed to share, Hanna?
No, I think you wrapped it up nicely. Time flies, but the workspace, as mentioned in the beginning, will remain open. So we'll do some housekeeping and cleaning on this page that you are viewing right now, and then open it up altogether for you. So everything we did today will be visible for you here also after the session. I think there were a lot of questions, especially for Lotta during her presentation, so she'll get back to those afterwards. They will also all be there even if we move forward in our steps here. So all of us, I'm sure, will return to any unanswered questions after this session. So don't be a stranger. Hope to see you around.
But we have a couple of minutes left, so we're happy to stay for a couple of minutes and do some more questions. And Lotta, if you want to, you're welcome to get back on stage together with us as well. So let's have a look at the questions and see what we can pick. Maybe we can just, Hanna, I pick a question and then you can maybe pick a question.
Yes.
So we had...
Here we have Lotta back on stage.
Exactly. So I think there was one question about that I also think I answered in the workspace that I could just do a quick recap of here now. So what timeframes do you use for service, considering we're talking about changing habits and routines, behaviors, and not just the application of learning, but the recollection and embedment of it? So as I mentioned in the workspace earlier, of course, we want to do a survey before we start the program to have something to compare with afterwards. But then we also want to do maybe a little different type of service during the program to identify any opportunities and feedback to help us improve the program along the way to make it more useful and valuable. A similar type of survey we probably want to do right after the program as well, when we have the program fresh in mind, to see how valuable and applicable people feel that the program was for them. But then afterwards, depending on what the intention of the program was, we also want to do a follow-up survey or interviews or observation, maybe a couple of weeks to a couple of months after the program as well. to make sure it depends a little bit on what type of change we want to achieve. For some behaviors, we might just need to wait for a couple of weeks before being able to see our team members starting to apply the learnings already. But for other things, we might want to do a new check-in after a couple of months to give people enough time to practice, but also give them enough time to, maybe we also want to double check after a while how the behaviors have evolved, if we're still doing it or if it has become forgotten. But Lotta, for example, for the equality course that we did, what time frame do we have planned for the follow-ups there?
The follow-ups will be bi-monthly until the end of this year. So then we will have that.
That's also a very good reminder to keep thinking about these things and reflect on how we changed our behaviors after that.
Yes.
Lotta, if you still have a couple of minutes, there was a question about, is there any examples of the data or reports that you can get from Housebase that could be used to measure or evaluate ROI or application of training? If you have anything quick at hand, that would be super useful.
Perfect. Yes. Now we're looking at the course workspace analytics. So we can have a quick overview just like this. So how many invited users have been active? How many of them have contributed to the content? How many visits throughout a certain time frame? So you can also adjust it here on even a daily level if you wish to show. Total amount of comments, amount of contributions like we saw there, amount of likes. But then also we have an activity map. So on a graph, when is the activity highest? And here we can see that as we had our last kind of joint session in this workspace, it has slowed down, but still we see activity. People come in and read the comments, which is super nice. Then also this isn't somehow reloading. Let's see if it's my internet. Okay, now the time frame changed quite a bit, but we can see how many people have visited each page, and then also how much time on average was spent on each page. So these are the kind of quick analytics you can get from here. Again, you can filter them per user group, per role, if you have that kind of any kind of filter you want to add there. So this is possible. And then you can, of course, export all the data to Excel and create your own graphs there for more kind of like detailed data.
Right. And in terms of more qualitative reports, I know that what we can do with our AI Plus is to, for example, prompt for a report, so to say, on a specific question. So, for example, we could use the input from a poll or a pulse and combine that with the input in an open-ended question type of a chat and ask specifically for a report on XYZ. And that we could have built already beforehand, so we know what we will follow up once we get there.
Yes, correct.
All right.
There was also
a question.
Yeah, there was also a question about, do you have your own AI in Housebase, or did we use another one?
Yeah, we answered that one earlier.
Okay, great.
We do.
Sorry, I missed that. There was another question I found really interesting. It can often be difficult to get feedback from participants. Are there any tips that people are willing to share to provide more feedback or respond to the survey? So this was a question from Tin. And I think one thing we learned with Housebase is also the value of doing these surveys and sharing these questions in a shared workspace where everyone can see the answers and participate in the discussion. Then you add a little bit of social pressure because you can clearly see who has answered and who hasn't. And you also get curious to see what insights and learnings others have shared. Anything you would like to add to that, Lotta and Hanna? Any tips?
Of course, it's also about what's in it for me. So why would I answer? Why would I join in? And I'd say that it often helps if you see what is on sort of in the other end of the process. What is there to expect? What am I impacting here if I join in? Or what do I like, what do I not, sorry, losing my words here. Like, if I don't join, if I don't say anything, what will I miss out on, so to say?
Exactly. And that's something we didn't touch on too much today as either, the ROI of these learning programs for the participants themselves. And these can often be things like career growth opportunities, possibility to develop your team, build stronger connections, more opportunities to collaborate and learn from each other. So that's also something that we should keep in mind and not forget about. But we're approaching the end of this webinar. Time really, as Hannah said, flies by quickly when you have fun. And you really enjoyed all the questions and discussions with all of you here today. So thank you, and really appreciate all of you for taking the time to be here and learn together with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.